Welcome to the podcast editing and support show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. Everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Now, one thing I talk about on the show often is a thing called SpeakPipe. Now, what is SpeakPipe, Dave? SpeakPipe is a way for you to get voice messages from amazing people like Roger, who's here with me right now. Roger sends me the SpeakPipe message, and he listens to my shows, which is amazing, the How to Podcast series and the podcast editing and support show. And Roger lays me a message, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to respond. And we've had a little back and forth. And here he is. Roger's here to talk about his journey as a podcast editor, as a musician, which I love. We also connect on that. And he's got 2 different podcasts as well. He's got it all. And he's here with me today from listener to guest on the podcast. Roger, welcome to both shows. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Dave. Real pleasure to be on your shows. As I've told you off mic, big fan of your show, new fan, new listener. And thank you so much for having me here. Appreciate it.
Roger, where are you in this big world of ours?
I'm in Devon in the UK, which is like the southwest. I don't know if you're familiar with Cornwall at all, but we're the county above Cornwall.
There you go. Everything sounds so official in England. Every time I get to talk to somebody from England, I feel like I need to sit up proper. And I learn things like sayings like, I'm going to get a proper job. And I'm like, a proper job? That sounds very official. Like every time I talk to people, there's actually a meetup group that I'm part of. And it's based in the UK. And I'm the only Canadian that shows up to this UK-based virtual Zoom thing. And I get to see these people are just so cool. And the one thing I learned from Northern England is you have breakfast, dinner, and tea. I think it's called tea. And that's supper or dinner. Because they were saying they're going to take a break in our little meetup and they're going to go put their tea in the oven. And I'm looking around as some very confused Canadian going, I thought you like boiled tea on the stove I don't, yeah. Anyway, so I was totally confused, but I love all the interesting things I hear when I talk to people from the UK. So I know I don't have an accent, but you have a beautiful accent, Roger.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's funny, really briefly, I get told quite often, where are you from? Where's your accent from? Because when I was a kid, I lived in the States for like 2 or 3 years down in Georgia. Oh. And I wasn't born there. I was born here in the UK, but I think it was enough to rub off and give me an accent. So...
Well, there you go. That's amazing. See, that's a good story. I love that. So tell everybody about your 2 podcasts that you host with your friends as well. It's music-based, which I love. So I'm a big fan of that. I'll be listening to it at work tonight, just so you know.
Oh, great.
But tell us about your 2 podcasts.
Yeah, of course, sure. So I host 2 podcasts. One has been going for 6 years, another for just 3 months. The first one that's been going for the longest time is the Weekly Song Podcast, which is... a show where myself and my musician friend, Declan Kitchener, a great songwriter, we each write a song every week, and we come onto the show not having heard each other's songs, and we play the songs to each other, and we discuss how we wrote them, what went into the lyrics, what went into the whole construction of a song. And having the deadline of, you got to get this done by Sunday night, is a great motivating factor. And it means that we write a ton more than we would if we just kind of were left to our own devices. So the second show is the monthly cover podcast, which is like a sister show, which is 4 of us. It is myself and Declan, but we also have our friends Josh James and Sammy Jonas on the show. And every month we convene at my place here, and we turn on the cameras and the mics, and one person challenges the others, including themselves, to cover a song with a certain challenge. Could be a song by somebody who's famously worn makeup, could be Bowie, could be, whoever, Kiss, or like it could be a song from 1973, it could be anything, and then you have to go away, cover it, and bring it back to the show and talk about how you produced that song. So,
wow. All right. How long have you been doing music for?
I am 32 now, and I started playing guitar and piano when I was 12, and I've been at it 20 years.
I love the idea of music and podcasting. Mm-hmm. I know one thing I hear from a lot of people, Roger, is the whole thing about licensing around music and podcasting. Any problems that you guys have come across in your show, especially the covers? Have you ever had any things that make it a little difficult for you guys?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. I mean, with the weekly song stuff, it's not really an issue unless we kind of play somebody else's song as a reference point, in which case we have had some copyright issues, but very, very rare. With the monthly cover podcast, so far we're just kind of like leaning into the fact that we're going to get copyright strikes because we put the stuff on YouTube, but it's more just a case of we enjoy doing it. It's a nice avenue, a nice outlet. So we're not too bothered about like, oh no, it's not being monetized. So I don't know, we just enjoy it.
Okay, that's what I was curious about, because I love doing cover tunes as well. And I love when people can take a song and make it different and unique, and I've actually heard stories of like Cheap Trick a long time ago. They put out a song and they did one version, another band did a cover version, and they actually liked the cover version better, went back and re-recorded the original because the other band did it better than they did for their own song. And I'm like, well, there you go. Cover versions are needed in this big world of ours. So Absolutely. It's a great idea for 2 shows. I like
Thank you very much. It reminds me of the Dylan hearing Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, and Dylan goes, I'm going to play it like that from now on.
Right? Yeah, I like it. So you could be inspiring a whole new generation of music. So for your listeners for those 2 shows, any feedback? Have you heard from your listeners at all?
On the Weekly Song podcast more so, because it's more like well established. It's been going longer. And the monthly cover podcast is kind of ticking along nicely, but it's still a growing thing. But yeah, we have regular correspondence with our listeners on the Weekly Song podcast, because people kind of like write in with their own songs and go, hey, I just wrote this in a week, check it out. And like they'll provide some feedback and insight into what they're doing. So it's mostly that kind of thing, really.
Okay. So we'll have links to both of those podcasts in the notes, obviously, so people can go listen and follow and share. And if you love music, there you go. Roger's got a couple more new shows for you to add to your queue of all the things you listen to. And then on top of this, you do music, you do podcasts, you also do editing. And that's another interesting thing that we're connecting about, is you edit for other people's shows. And how long have you been a podcast editor, Roger?
6 years now. 6 years.
Wow. So how did you get started in that?
Well, as a musician, I was looking for ways to be able to record from home, to work from home, to be able to take, time to record and be at my desk. I mean, we're on video right now, you and I, Dave, and you can see instruments around me and that sort of thing. And so I thought, I'll go on Fiverr and I'll put up my skills as a guitarist, as a singer, as a producer, that kind of thing. And, I was kind of ticking along with that. And then I kind of, somebody asked if I could edit a podcast. And I thought, no, sure, because I already edited for the Weekly Song podcast at this point. And so I took a crack at it, and I found that I had quite an affinity for it. I was quite, I kind of got it immediately, And then I got a message on Fiverr saying, hey, we noticed you edit podcasts. Would you like to do a trial edit, and then which might lead to more work? And so I did this trial edit, and I remember the first trial edit I did, I just really dialed in and just like, I'm going to do the absolute best I can possibly do at this, because I knew it could lead to maybe another show. One other show at that point would have been like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And so I just did a good job on the edit, and it led to me working with the Podcast Collective, which was the first kind of little company, or not little company, first podcasting company I worked for and still work for to this day. And that led to, working with more companies, working with more freelance people, and, gone from there, really.
That's one of the hardest things I've found when I talk to people that want to start podcast editing, is they don't know where to start. They're just like, maybe they don't have the musical ability, so they don't have that tool in their toolbox to use that as a starting point. And they're like, how do I even find clients? Like, I don't even know where to start. Like, yeah, we can go on Fiverr, we can do that. But I'm looking for more of a long-term relationship. But I like that you used Fiverr as a way to get to that long-term relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at the time, it was almost like that was the only real avenue I knew about. A friend of mine said, I didn't even know what Fiverr was at the time. I think it wasn't as advertised back then in like 2019. And a friend of mine said, oh, you should put yourself as a guitarist or whatever on Fiverr. And so I did that. So it was really just a kind of necessity sort of thing. It was just like, oh, well, this seems like the best platform. And then, of course, that led to the things I mentioned before. And it kind of took off from there, really.
How many podcasts are you editing for right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I'd say like 15, 20 between
Wow.
that, because there's
Wow.
some are kind of like every single week or a few times a week, and some are like they put one out every quarter or something like that. So it depends. Between 15 and 20 though.
Okay. Okay. And so they're all different types of podcasts too, right?
Yeah, all sorts of different types. I do dietary, fitness, meditation, business, leadership, accounting, payroll. I edit for all sorts of different shows. Pop culture, pretty much pop is one I do. Subtext is another one that focuses more on literature and poetry. Just all sorts of things. So that's the great thing. I'm sure you can relate with like editing for people. Is like I just really like hearing conversations, and I'm a podcast listener myself. So being able to hear all this stuff like an editor it's great. I love it.
Do you think that's a good idea to be a podcast listener if you want to be an editor?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the same thing as like, I'm not really a YouTuber, but I do put stuff on YouTube of my own, like for my music and stuff. And I think it helps to just kind of look at what the really great people are doing in YouTubing and podcasting, because then you kind of go, they've got a little intro before they do that, and like, oh, it's actually more tightly edited. Whereas if you kind of have like this kind of naivety about like, oh, what should a podcast sound like? And I'm trying to edit for other people, and I don't know what good podcasts sound like. I'm uninformed. So if I actually have like a bunch of shows I listen to, that does help.
Okay. And you connected with me through a show that you're editing, which was amazing. I was a guest on a show, and here it is. You're the editor for the show. That's pretty cool. I gotta ask, side note, how much editing did you have to do on Dave? Was it okay? Like, give me some feedback here as an editor.
Oh my gosh. I'm not even just being flattering here. Your show was so easy to edit because I do the audio and then I do the video. And the audio is the bit that's a lot more granular usually, you know, the ums, the coughs, the ticks, the little mouth noise and things like that. Yours was so clean. It really was. It was just a case of, I think probably because you podcast and you're used to sitting on the mic and you edit as well, you probably have more of an ear for what people are trying to cut out in general. So it was great. It was a great one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, there you go. Because I feel really nervous to ask that to a fellow editor, because I know I'm editing a show right now. I had a guest, and he was an machine. Oh Lord, every pause between any thought, any space between a word was an And I'm 17 minutes in. I think I've removed 35 so far. And I have like another 40 minutes to go. And I'm taking a break from that to come and talk to you, Roger. So so when I listen to podcasts and when I do my own show, I know I got things that I say. I say the word "so" a lot. I say I love that after my guest talks. I do it all the time. And people are like, Dave, just leave it in. We know you say it. But the one thing I find that being an editor and being a podcaster, it's helping me to clean up the way I talk in real life. So if I ever go to a stage and stand in front of a live audience, I'm not going to be so reliant on those ums and ahs and so's, and because there's no one to edit me in real time. So as I become better at getting on the mic and removing some of those crutch words, it helps me as an editor, but it also helps me in real life. So I see a bonus to podcasting just for me as a human being. I'm getting better by hearing myself on a regular basis.
I completely relate. I really do. We all have those little nuances and peculiarities to how we talk. And now I'm really conscious that I don't want to use filler words as I'm talking. But no, you're totally right. I relate to that completely. Yeah.
Okay. So all the different podcasts that you do, are they all solo? Are they all interview? Are they like they have elements of music and sound, and the meditation one I would think would be a little bit different than an interview podcast. What kinds of different podcast formats are you doing as well?
Well, right now, it's all sorts. Some solo shows, some that are just someone sat in front of a mic, talking on a bunch of bullet points for 20 minutes. And those are really interesting. And I think it's an aside, but I think those are a really interesting way to do a podcast and quite an easy entry point as well. But yeah, also, interview shows where there's the host and they join with someone either in the room or somebody who is, remote. and then they have a conversation and they talk like that. Some podcasts are 4 or 5 person podcasts where they all join up again, either in person or remote, and so then you have 4 moving parts, 4 tracks in a project, and you have to there's just more moving parts and more to play with there. And then there is there's shows like I do a show called Nakedly Examined Music, which is a really great podcast where each time the host will have a different musician on the show, and they'll go through a little bit of their back catalogue, and they'll go through, how did you produce this? And, at that point in your career, how come you made these choices and you're working with these people? And let's take a listen to the bridge of that song. You know what I mean? So then they'll ask me to insert that part and fade out so that then the voices can come back in. So that's a really fun one to do, actually. That's a new one for me, but I've really liked that.
Okay. Yeah, that's creative. I like those creative ones. I try to throw little things into my show just because sometimes I get bored just hearing myself. So I'll throw little music things and weird little clips and stuff just to kind of break things up. I like when I have 4 main points, I like to have some kind of signal that we're going to the next point. So I'll do a little ding or a little whatever, a whoosh or whatever you call it, just to kind of say, well, that's done. Now we're on point number 2, point number 3, point number 4. It kind of just, for people that are listening, we always need to remember that people are usually doing something else when they're listening. They're not just focused on us in the moment listening to our show. So anything that keeps them coming back to the content, you go, oh, something's happened, right? It kind of resets. And anything you can use around sound effects or music or whatever will really help your audience to stay engaged in the content instead of just a wall of words for 45 minutes. Your retention rates are going to kind of go down after a while if people just kind of snooze off. So any of those little tools are kind of cool to bring people back. Do you like to use things like that when you're doing editing as well? Do some of your shows require you to have those kind of little transition things in your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, where it just adds a layer of production value to a show that, it could just be somebody talking and somebody who's very engaging talking, but it adds an extra thing. You kind of go, oh, we're going to the next section, or whatever it is, or a piece of music or a bed of music underneath the intro. So it signifies when the intro has ended and when the body of the podcast has begun. Sometimes it's a case of clients will send me, look, we picked out this piece of music, this sting, this sound effect. We'd love you to insert it at these points in the show. So it's very much dictated. There are other points where the show is not with that production value right when they send me the show. When they start to send me, as an editor, they send me the show. And sometimes actually quite often, really. I mean, I just like to kind of add as much as I can without kind of overstepping my mark and say, hey, when you go into the outro, it'd be cool if you had a sound effect here. And, with, sound design background and music background and stuff, I can say, hey, here's a little folder of some sound effects that you could try out. Try these out, and here's a kind of edit with it, and here's an edit without. If you want to use the one without, be my guest, but here's the one with the sound effects. So you can kind of hear what it would sound like with that extra stuff. I think it adds a lot,
I love a nice quiet music bed behind a voice for a story, for example, or meditation podcast. I just did an episode for the How to Podcast series around how fast people talk on the microphone. Some people are very slow talkers, and it takes them minutes and minutes and minutes to finish a sentence. You're like, oh my goodness. Do you have a dial you can turn up just a little bit because you're really slow? And then there's people who talk so fast that I get anxiety as a listener because they don't take a breath. They're just word to word, all the way through, all the way through. I feel like they're selling as an auctioneer. And if I put my hand up, I'm going to buy something. They're just so quick when they talk. So one of the things I did an episode on is I put out that you should think of podcasting to 92 beats per minute. Should be your base level when you're speaking.
Like hip hop.
Put on a song. Yeah, put on a song at 92 beats per minute and just kind of find the gallop and the pace and the cadence of 92 beats per minute, and then shut the song off and just stay there in 92 beats per minute. And that's where you should be. Your resting voice should be there. So if you're too fast, slow down. If you're too slow, speed up. because that's kind of an engaging speed for people to stay in tune with you, and it's kind of a nice rhythm. So I actually put in, a metronome behind me in the podcast, and I put 92 beats per minute on, and I talked over the metronome to show you, here's where you should be as kind of a resting space for your voice. And it's an encouragement for people that talk on the mic, because we don't get a lot of training on this. We start a podcast, hand it over to an editor, and then they have to make us sound good. But we as podcasters need to level up and understand how we can be better. So whether it's listening to a song at 92 beats per minute, and I actually provided a whole sheet of songs in all different genres at 92 beats per minute. So you can put any song you like on and just listen to that and get the feel of that song. And that becomes your foundation for your podcast.
That's fascinating. That's a really great approach. I've never heard of anything like that. Love it.
Right. And I think it's because of our musical background, Roger. Like, we understand what 92 beats per minute feels like, right? We know what 128 beats per minute feels like. As soon as we start saying those numbers, we can kind of anticipate that feel and that sound. And as musicians, we listen to each other, and the drummer's keeping us going, and we know that the bass and the drums work together so well. And we become so keen to listening to each other in a musical sense that we don't need to explain it as much. But to somebody who's never done music, they don't understand beats per minute. They don't understand that language, right? So if we can take what we know and what you know as a music person and bring that to podcasters and give them this kind of new knowledge, they're like, oh, maybe I am talking too slow. Maybe I am talking too fast, right? At the end of the day, we want to be clear and have clarity to our voices so that nobody's wrestling, trying to figure out turning up the volume, turning it down, slow you down, speed you up. Like, we just want it to be nice and clean and clear for our customers so that people will come back and listen to more episodes. So any of those little tips are great. Do you have any tips that you give to people beyond, like you mentioned, like fading in the music and little swipes and whooshes and stuff? Any other tips that you give to podcasters that would help them so that they could be better for their editors, maybe?
That's a really good question, and not one I've been asked before, but I think that a lot of podcasting is confidence, isn't it? Like, you get on the mic and, particularly as someone who works from home, if somebody's, say, a small business owner or something, and they work from home, they're an entrepreneur, and they go, I'm going to start a podcast, it's like red light syndrome, to use a music term, You turn on the mic and you turn on the camera and you sat in front of it, and you clam up and you still got your notes on the screen or on your piece of paper, but you don't have the confidence because you haven't spoken all day. You know what I mean? So I think just really simple things that almost go without saying, but have a glass of water. Your throat's probably dry if you haven't been speaking all day. Make sure you've eaten. Make sure you have some energy in your system. Listen to a song, to your point, but like not so much the rhythm part, but listen to a song before you start that gets you pumped up. Something that like you would listen to on the treadmill at the gym, where you go, okay, right, I'm ready. And then, this kind of goes with music, and it goes with podcasting as well. Before you press record and go, hi, welcome to the show, which is such a hard start, your body's, hasn't prepared yet. Warm up, just press record. It's still running. It's fine. You can edit it out later. But like 1, 2, 3, test, 1, 2, 3, and you talk, you read a paragraph of a book or something, and all of a sudden your vocal cords are warmed up, you're in the zone, and you've already got all the kind of bad fluff out of the way. So when you really start the episode, you're in the zone.
And one other tip that I have from recording in studio, because I recorded with a lot of original bands, is every time we walked into the studio, the mics were hot. It didn't matter if we were just tuning up, playing through parts of the song, jamming around. We'd run through the song a couple times before we record the real version. We recorded everything because sometimes a magic happened, and we're like, at the end of it, we look at the engineer, and we're like, did you hit record? No. And I'm like, oh, that was so good. We did this little thing, and this music happened and magic happened, and we didn't capture it. So we just turned the mics on, let them run, let them roll. We can always just delete what we don't want later, but there might be something in there that's just like gold that we didn't anticipate in the moment. So we always hit record. So same to you. I tell people, just hit record, get it started, find your voice, get comfortable, and then just cue in the editor. Okay, now I'm going to start. That's always nice. You get a nice warm up. I like that. The other thing, I remember sitting with an engineer in the studio. Our singer was in the booth, sang through a song. It was perfect. Like, she nailed it. It was so good. Like, you could tell she just put everything into it. And I thought we were done. The engineer pushes the callback button into the studio and says, okay, one more time. This time I want you to smile. And I looked at him and I'm like, what do you mean, smile? He's like, you can hear a smile. And I'm like, you can hear a smile? He's like, yeah, just watch. She did it again, one more time, a full run through the song, and she was smiling and happy. And it does something to your face. It actually changes the structure of your face. It raises kind of a little bit of your voice as well. And it puts you in a different spot by smiling. So as podcasters, I always encourage people, when you come to the mic, don't be like so down. Don't be so like staring at your notes. Smile. Be animated. There's no one who can see you, but move your hands. Like, be energetic and put yourself into it. And don't just sit there and drop your shoulders and mumble through a podcast. Like, sit up, show up for your show. Somebody's going to listen to this and you want them to connect with you. So podcast with a smile. There you go. How's that?
Love it. I completely agree. I remember actually when we started getting into doing more of the Weekly Song podcast, I would stand up. I remember that made a big difference because usually I'd be sat down and, everyone knows how it is at a desk. You kind of could slump your shoulders and curve your spine and all of a sudden your energy is a little lower. Whereas if you stand up, as you said, at the time we didn't do video, so no one could see us, but it made a difference because I was talking, I was more animated. And when people listen to our podcasts, they're kind of coming for our personality as much as the info and the value that they're getting. It's, you want to listen to somebody who has a little bit of oomph, a little bit of pep in their step. And
as a singer, voice control, very important, right? Where your voice and the power is coming from. I heard a podcaster and he did from his throat voice and his upper chest, he did the alphabet and he could hardly get through the alphabet. And then he did from his diaphragm down lower, using the air from his lower part of his body. He was able to do the same alphabet 3 times with no problem, without taking a breath.
Wow.
So there's power in the lower part of your body and your torso than it is in your throat. So if you're speaking from your throat all the time, the singers will tell you all the power is down low. And you can hold that note. You can push out a lot of power, a lot of air. It comes right from your lower part of your body. So as a singer, to a podcaster who has no knowledge of music or singing ability, any other voice control tips that you kind of know about that could help a podcaster?
I think it's just about kind of getting out of your own way a lot of the time. When I've done when I've taken vocal coaching in the past, just a few times, one of the main exercises I took away from that was you were speaking about speaking for your diaphragm rather than having your head, your head voice. Yeah. And one of the things that a great vocal coach I had told me was stand up, sit up tall or stand up tall, and so your spine is straight, and then make the V sound, the V sound, v. And you can feel it. When you really do it hard, you can feel it in your abdomen, v. And you want to sing and talk from down there, And it's something that doesn't come very easily at the start when you first come across it because it's not second nature yet. But eventually it does make a difference. But as far as, I think it's just confidence. It's just about getting yourself in the right zone, warming up. I mean, I'm reiterating points I've said, but warming up, certainly being hydrated, being well fed, and just like you said, just being in a good frame of mind, having a smile and kind of like bringing that to the show. As much energy as you can bring, I really do think it impacts the kind of the output of the podcast itself.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit of tech stuff too from you, Roger. Like, what are you using at home to do all your edits? Are you being told by your clients what tools to use, or are you free to choose whatever you want to use? What's your go-to setup that you're using right now?
So I edit on a iMac. I use Logic Pro. That's my editing. It's also my recording software. And I find that whichever DAW, digital audio workstation, you're using is the right one as long as it works for you, whether you're recording a podcast or you're editing a podcast. I think the same goes for both. Sometimes I think people who are new to working with an editor they can go, hang on a second, I'm recording in Riverside or I'm recording in Ableton. How are you going to edit my show if you're working in Logic? And the great thing with cross-platforming like that is that, as you well know, Dave, once you export the file, which however you record it, if it's an MP3, a WAV, a FLAC, or whatever it is, you can then send that to your editor and they can work on that and edit that in an entirely different program. So generally speaking, I have free reign to use Logic for audio editing. It's all I've ever used, and I've worked with a plethora of different people who've recorded in Cubase, Pro Tools, whatever it is. Or even if they don't have a DAW and they use something like I said before, Riverside or something like that, which is just an online platform. It's all, these days it's all kind of, you can cross-platform pretty easy.
Okay. And then speaking to the podcasters that are listening who are looking to hire a podcast editor, any tips that you would give to a podcaster on what to look for in a podcast editor that would make it easier to work with this person? Any special things that you like to do for your podcasters?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is being friendly as an editor. And I think that when you're looking for a podcast editor, somebody that just is easy to talk to, who's not kind of dismissive, somebody who actually is interested in your show. I think that's a really, really distinguishing factor. Because all of the shows I edit for, I really like the shows, And I go, hey, we should try this. We should try this idea on your show. I'm not too hands-on. I'm not like, hey, let me be one of the producers of this show. But where there, you can kind of, it takes a little bit of tact, but where you can feel out that somebody wants a little bit more production value, there's usually scope for that to happen. So somebody friendly, somebody approachable, obviously quick turnaround within your budget, all these type of things. But that's the same with any service, I suppose, whether you're getting your car MOT'd or whatever. But just that kind of straightforward stuff. I think it should be a simple process. I think that there are editors perhaps who maybe overcomplicate things, which can actually be quite a deterrent for new podcasters particularly. They go, okay, well, I've got this idea for a show, I've recorded it, I want to send it to an editor, but they need what kind of file? Like what? Whereas if you have an editor that's just like, hey, you've recorded your show, that's great. Okay, just email these particular details or this link, or you use Google Drive, great. Or you use WeTransfer, that's awesome. Riverside link, go for it. You know what I mean? So you just make it as easy as possible for every podcaster. I think a good editor will be accommodating in those ways.
I think it kind of goes both ways between an editor finding a podcaster to work for and a podcaster finding an editor. It's kind of a musical reference again, back to pulling together a band. I've had music auditions in my house where we're trying to bring in a new band member. They might be the best guitarist you've ever met. Like, they have every pedal known to man. They are just they're just amazing, but they have no personality, right? I can't imagine being in a car on a long trip from gig to gig to gig with a person I can't stand to be near, even though they're an amazing musician. And there's been times where we've picked somebody not as talented, but they really connected really well with the band on a personal level, and we're willing to go a little less skill and talent to have the right fit, to have the right person that I feel comfortable with. Because again, you're locked in a car, traveling and setting up and tearing down at 2 a.m. You want to know that the person beside you is somebody you want to be near and with. So as a podcast editor and support person, you're looking for a podcaster that you like, that you can get along with. And the same thing, a podcaster, you want to find an editor who might, even though they might have the best tools, they might not be the nicest person to talk to and deal with. Find the person who you connect with and you have a good fit with. I think that's probably one of the key things I would say to people when they're looking for somebody to work with.
I couldn't agree more. That's so true. And yeah, sometimes you do, as the musician thing, sometimes you meet a great musician, but they don't listen very well. It's not just a case of can you shred, can you play very, very fast and proficiently? Are you listening to what the bass player is doing? Are you listening to what the podcast client is actually after? Or are you just kind of steamrolling them?
Right. Yeah, and those people don't last very long. They don't connect with an audience. They're all about themselves. You'll see them, and if you ever go watch a band when it comes to the soloing times, if you see all the band members kind of turn away, like they're not even giving attention to the person doing the lead, there's an indication there's something happening behind the scenes. Just so you know, watch the band. If they're all in there together and they're having fun and they're playing off each other and the guitar player's looking at the drummer and the bass player's looking at the drummer, that's a good environment. When everybody's in their corner staring at their feet, something's going on in that band, I can tell you right now, just from looking at from the audience. Something's up. So when I look at a connection between a podcaster and an editor, I want to see those people working together, having fun, bouncing off ideas off each other, being each other's support. That's what I love to see, not just this kind of cold, I send the file to Roger, Roger sends it back to me, and I don't even talk to Roger. I like this kind of back and forth conversation thing that happens in podcasting. I think that's really good.
I do too. I completely agree. I mean, it does depend on like the different personalities of people. I mean, I won't lie. I do have some people who will go, here are the files. I want it by Monday. And I go, sure, you got it. And I'll send it back to them. But those are often the shows where like the production pieces are already like very much in place. Yeah. There's not really like the show is the show and it's got its moving parts already. But no, on the whole, I agree. I think the podcast can generally grow from having that back and forth and relationship, you know? I mean, it's people working together at the end of the day.
Awesome. Are you currently accepting clients at all, Roger?
I am, yes. Yeah, I've got a couple of slots at the moment, and I'm accepting clients. I've also recently launched a website. So, which sounds strange because I've been podcast editing for 6 years and I've only recently launched a website. And so that's kind of my new venture at the moment. So I have some slots open at the moment for podcast editing.
Well, the idea for this, to have you on, is not just to have a conversation. I love it, but I want you to plug what you do, Roger, and I want to get more clients for you as well. So please, can you please tell us more about your services, what you do, and your website? Let's talk about. I'll have links as well in the notes, but tell us more.
Sure thing. Yeah, of course. Well, I appreciate you asking. First of all, thank you for giving that platform. So the website is sustainpodcastediting.com, and on Instagram it's @sustainpodcastediting. And I like the name Sustain a lot because it comes from a musical term, of course. You know, you play a note and it continues. It has some tail to it. You know, it keeps going. And I think on my website, the thing I kind of point out is that a lot of podcasts are great ideas at the start. And, you know, the concept is amazing and the people doing it have the energy behind it. But you kind of get to a point with the production. I've had this with my shows as well, where you go, it's actually a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. And so you go, okay, I'm going to start editing. This takes 4 hours to get it really tight. And so the idea of sustaining your show, sustain podcast editing, is handing that over to somebody who is in your corner, who can edit for you, who can add that production value so that you just get to worry about making the show really great, you know, and just sitting there and recording, talking to your guests, having a good time, and then somebody else is handling the production side of things and you know that you can trust that person.
Nice. Okay. And then as far as clients, who are you looking to serve?
Anyone, really. I mean, it has to be a show that, you know, I feel like we both resonate on, but I'm not picky in terms of genre. I think the upside of being a podcast editor is that you get to listen to so many different types of conversations, you know. I'm interested in a lot of different things, and as I spoke about before, I edit for a plethora of different topics and styles of podcast, and they're all equally interesting. So it's not like it's just like specifically one niche like business owners or you know, entrepreneurs or something. I mean, those people are very much clients I work for currently. But just somebody who's making a podcast, passionate podcasters particularly, I suppose. Okay.
And so to reach out to you, do you have like a free call that we can do with you to kind of talk about what we're looking for? Is that kind of part of the process?
Absolutely, yeah. So it all goes through the website, sustainpodcastediting.com, and then that we have the contact form on there. So just reaching out, sending even just a DM on Instagram or emailing, and just kind of going from there. And we can jump on a Zoom call. We can have a chat about what your show is and what you're looking to gain from it. Because I think part of working with an editor is, particularly if you're just starting, is growing the show and having the show be something in a few months that it isn't. I don't just mean in terms of listeners either. I mean in terms of like, the production value and how you want it to sound. You know, maybe it's a case of looking at different microphones. Maybe it's a case of choosing who your audience really should be. So yeah, absolutely there's a way to get in touch and have a call for sure.
Awesome. Again, Roger, thank you so much for leaving me that SpeakBite message. You made my day. I played it for my wife. She's like, that is so cool.
Oh, cool.
And you're getting voice messages from the other side of the pond. That you made my day. So that really was cool. And again, thank you for listening to the shows. I appreciate that. And for editing me in such a great way. It made me sound better, which I love. I'm excited for you, Roger. I'm excited for you to continue to grow your business and help more podcasters, your music career to keep going. And you never know who's going to hear your episode, right? Press play. Somebody's going to hear it and go, hey, wait, I want to talk to Roger and, reach out to this guy. So congratulations on all the success so far. I'm excited to see where this ends up for you. And thanks again for listening to the podcast. And now I have more episodes for your shows I get to listen to as well. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Dave. I genuinely really appreciate it. It's lovely to talk to you as well. I feel like we're birds of a feather, you know?
There we go. It's good. Awesome. Everyone, all the information for Roger will be in the show notes. Please go and reach out to Roger. You're looking for an editor? Please reach out to Roger. I know he'd love to talk to you. Tell him about your plan, what you're working on. And maybe you've been working with an editor and you're just not connecting really. And you're looking for somebody that maybe has a little bit more musical background that could bring to your podcast and make it even better. Roger's your person. Make sure you reach out to Roger soon. Again, Roger, thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupport.com, podcasteditingandsupport.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.